All right. Hello, everybody. It's great to have you here today. My name is Tom Romanoff. I'm the Director of Policy for the Association for Computing Machinery. Welcome to our presentation on expanding regions, the Technology Policy Committee, which we're launching. This is going to be a part of our broader policy committees. So if you're new to ACM's policy world, welcome. If you are part of one of the regional committees or interested in getting involved, please make sure that you contact us. But first off, we have a poll, which you should be seeing, that talks a little bit about, what regions you're most interested to contribute policy discussions about. You'll see it kind of go live on my screen there. As we're waiting for folks to trickle in, I will just briefly go over kind of the run of show for you today. Um, and Welcome. That's done. We're going to go over an overview of our policy committees and our wins and best practices. We'll also talk about ACM's global level initiatives with multi-state and international organizations. And then we're going to talk about the launch of the expanding regions in the TPC. Finally, we'll go into kind of regional policy landscapes, which I suspect folks are very interested in. We have some great experts that have volunteered to share some of their perspectives on the regional policy committees. This is, global regions. So that's why the poll is really important. If you haven't filled it out, please make sure you do so. That's how we're going to do our breakout sessions. And we'll talk a little bit about the policy landscape as it relates to technology policy in those specific areas. And that should wrap it. Once we get done with the breakout sessions, we'll go to Q&A and wrap up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to one of the chairs, Jeanna Matthews, who will talk to you a little bit about our committees. Jeanna?
Hi, everyone. We're so delighted that you've joined us here today, along with my co-chair, Virginia Dignum. I am leading the ACM Global Technology Policy Council, and I put a link in the chat to a place where you can find information about the global TPC, also the existing regional TPCs, the US TPC, the Europe TPC, and also some of the initiatives under those TPCs, including ACM Tech Briefs and other policy products. The global TPC in particular sets the agenda for ACM's global policy activities and kind of serves as a central convening point for all of ACM's interactions with government organizations and matters of public policy more generally. And we're really excited to be here talking to you in particular about a new sort of regional council, the Expanding Regions TPC, which is a peer of the existing regional TPCs that we have. And we have a vision for this new Expanding Regions TPC being a place where all ACM members who are working in tech policy anywhere in the world can have a natural place to engage. And then we envision expanding regions as being a place that can incubate and launch additional regional TPCs. So when within expanding regions, there's sufficient interest in work in a particular region, then the natural next step would be to form a subcommittee within expanding regions for that region. And as that kind of solidifies and gains momentum, the next natural step, if there's interest, would be to spin off and become a full regional committee that's a peer of the existing ones. And it's worth noting that within ACM, there are already some regional councils, in particular ACM Europe, ACM India, and ACM China. And under the current ACM president, Yannis Ioannidis, and his ACM 4.0 initiative, which there's been some wonderful write-ups about that in communications of the ACM and other places. There was a global task force that proposed 4 new regional committees for Asia, Latin America, Africa, and North America. And the Globalization Board recognizes that it might need to split or coalesce these regional committees and councils over time. And we're thinking about it very similarly in the technology policy space. So we could map TPCs onto these regional committees, but we don't necessarily have to. The first one that we've been focusing on within expanding regions is a subcommittee for technology policy work in India. And that's nice because we do have a regional council in ACM India. And but we're also one of the next things we're thinking about as well is maybe a Latin America TPC where there isn't a regional committee yet for Latin America. And we're considering whether we're just talking with people in the region about what makes sense. It could be that it makes sense to have a committee focused on Brazil, for example. We're having those conversations, and we very much invite all of you who are here to get involved and help shape how that will evolve. I'd also very specifically like to say that while we are kind of prioritizing people who are living and working in a particular region, we also welcome people with special interest in a region, even if they're not living and working there. If you are living and working someplace else, but you've showed up today because you have special interest in technology policy in another region, we would love to know that and talk with you about the right ways to get involved. So that's some very high level overview. And I believe the next thing on the agenda might be an overview of some of the other things that are happening within the TPC, including some global initiatives. I believe my co-chair, Virginia Dignum, is going to come on and do that. And then you're going to hear from me again with a little more about the history of some of the TPC efforts within ACM. And then, as Tom said, we have some wonderful panelists for you coming up as well.
I firstly I have to apologize. I have a bad flu, so my voice is not very good. I thank you, Jeanna, for launching and describing what we have been doing, and indeed. I would like to talk a little bit also about the work that we are attempting to start towards global policy. So we are a global organization, and of course we are committed to policy and to activities in the different regions. And like Jeanna says, we have at this moment committees working on policy in Europe and in the United States. And with Expanding Regions Committee, we want to, in a sense, incubate more of those committees. But at the same time, we are also interested on collaboration and on contributing to policy at international level. By that, we mean to interact with the United Nations agencies, which is a large space and a space where much of policy happens, but also with other international organizations like, I don't know, the World Bank, or issues like the World Economic Forum and other types of large organizations for which we might, as ACM members, have something to contribute in terms of the technological developments, but also impact of technology in the different organizations. We have so far initiated contacts with ITU. ITU is the International Telecommunications Union, is part of the large United Nations agency, even though it is much older than the United Nations itself. So it existed already for over 150 years, I believe, since telex and telegrams and all those issues became a concern across borders. But since many years they are part of the United Nations. We have been in contact with them to understand how can we somehow contribute to their activities, maybe in terms of capacity building activities, maybe in terms of other other issues. We also have been in contact with UNESCO, which has, especially in the area of AI and in the area of the digital divide and the digitalization in the global south, have been very active. We are initiating connections with them, as well as with the broad United Nations agency. The United Nations, as you might know, have just recently approved formation of a scientific panel on AI to support the United Nations with developing a report on the state of the world in AI at a year level, which then will be discussed in what they call the global dialogue on AI. The format of these two things is very similar to the COPD, the climate organization, which is starting today as well in Brazil. And the idea is like in the same way that they do it for tracking climate change, tracking different initiatives, tracking new possibilities and new problems as well. There would be a similar activity which is going to start after they select the members of the panel to support tracking the developments, the challenges, and the possibilities of AI, which then will be discussed yearly in a global meeting, which they call the Global Panel on AI. Maybe some of you have proposed yourselves for being a member of the scientific panel. The call was open for quite some time. I think it closed a week ago or so. And we are trying, and we are hoping very much that there will be representation of ACM members. It's not an organization that will work with other with representations of other organizations. Members of the panel will be there at personal level, but of course we hope that some of those members will be also ACM members, and in that way we can create a bridge between the issues that we are doing and the concerns and the developments at the United Nations. So it's all initial. We are also looking forward to your own ideas and plans and possibilities in that area. But at the moment, like I say, we have been looking at the United Nations, first and foremost, at the United Nations family of agencies. And in particular, we are talking already with ITU. We are starting discussions with UNESCO and the United Nations Office for Technology very soon. And like I say, we hope very much that there will be somehow a bridge between ACM members and the members of the scientific panel on AI. I think that before we continue, I think this would be a good time to get some interactivity with the group, and we could launch the questions that we have in the Mentimeter to have an idea of what are the concerns of other ones. So these are the regions. Thank you very much to let us know. If you can still vote, I think, to which we will be splitting in meeting rooms later on in this session, and you can select here which ones you are most interested on. But maybe to hear a little bit from yourselves, I'm putting the Menti link on the chat, and also sharing my screen with the QR code if you want to connect to the Mentimeter. But maybe the one on the chat is easier.
And Jan, would you like to share the results, or could you share the results of the regions poll so people can kind of
Okay,
get a sense for
yeah.
who's in the room now? I'm seeing it. I'm not sure if you're all seeing it yet, so I can also just kind of read off what I'm seeing. Looks like we have about 80 people in the room at the moment, and looks like about 70 people filled out the poll. 31 of them said North America, 17 Europe, 9 in India, 4 in Latin America, 1 in Africa, 5 in Asia, 2 the rest of the world. So that just gives a sense of who's in the room today. But we're very much viewing this webinar not just as reaching out to all of you wonderful people who are able to join us today, but also as a resource that we'll be able to point people to who want to understand how to get involved with the expanding regions and the technology policy efforts at ACM more broadly. And great, Virginia's sharing.
I think that we are now seeing your own concerns. So what are the policy concerns that you as participants today are most interested in discussing or most concerned about? We'll let it, I see people are still voting, so please, we'll leave it for a little bit. And in the meantime, I don't know if any of the panelists would like to already comment on what we are seeing in terms of the main concerns. Not strangely, we see AI and issues around AI as being one of the main concerns, but also security, privacy, identity. Does any one of the panelists would like to comment on what we are seeing in this word cloud?
I'll just say that I think it's interesting that privacy is the largest. I might have predicted that AI would be the largest, although I see also privacy in AI. I'm very concerned about privacy, so I think I'm really glad to see that concern being echoed by others. Other panelists have thoughts about the results we're seeing come forward.
I think I might have expected to see AI more prominent, but and also given my own personal interests, security is in Europe at the moment. AI and cybersecurity are the two main sort of policy issues. So those would be the two that I would have been expecting to see, which I guess we are seeing there, but. I expected AI, like you, Jeanna, to be the largest in some ways.
I'm actually kind of glad to see it's not.
Yes.
And I'll just say while we're discussing the results a little, looking at them all, all of us kind of looking at them evolve, that the technology policy groups at ACM kind of do two things. They both ask what we as ACM members find important, where we would like to see more technology policy work and focus. But then also we're responding to the interests of policymakers. We're trying either responding directly because they've put out an RFI, requesting information from us, or we're trying to predict what we think they will be interested in. And those two don't always match. Yeah. Any other panelists have and by the way, thank you everyone for voting. I think we are going to take all of these things that you're saying here, even if we can't read them all and digest them in real time. And we are going to be talking about these and taking your feedback and having that influence some of the things we're going to be doing going forward. So even if we don't read all of each individual one, they're all important. And we will come back to them. Any other panelists have thoughts on this evolving landscape that we're seeing in front of us?
Yes, Jeanna, this is Mohan, and I think some of the bigger words are obvious, and of course privacy is not surprising, but to me there is an absence of one term which I thought would be there. Maybe just because I'm coming back from Australia today, which is social media. I think they've just introduced an age limitation that children under 16 will not get access to many of the social media platforms. So that has somehow not figured much here.
That's a very important comment. Thank you, Mohan. Indeed, maybe it shows a bit how much we see social media as part of the landscape in our backgrounds, that we not even think about it anymore as a policy concern, but indeed is an issue that is definitely also relevant to include. Maybe as we move forward, I think that this one is stable. Let's talk a little bit about how you think that policymakers around the world, especially in your regions, to whom they are listening and what kind of groups they are listening to. So I think you can move to the next question. Do you think that, and because we as members of ACM, we are also individuals and part of maybe academic institutions, maybe industries, maybe other organizations, it would be good to see how you think that a professional organization like ACM can contribute, or which are other organizations that are contributing at the same time.
So while we're filling this out and watching this evolve, I'll just quickly say that a little bit later, I'm going to talk about some of the history of the TPC efforts at ACM and where I think we've had some impact over time. You know, it's very much different in different parts of the world, whether policymakers, we think they're likely to want to listen directly to ACM, whether there's going to be call for you know, RFIs, requests for inputs, like we've been responding to in, you know, some of the existing regional committees we've where work has been going on, or what is the most effective way to be getting these conversations into the public space, whether that is op-eds or whether it is trying to cultivate relationships with people in government that then might listen to us, even if they're not putting out requests for information. So we really appreciate your thoughts on the most effective ways to be most effective in different regions.
And I think that
And I see Carlos is saying a really good point in the chat, that it would be nice to see these answers on this particular slide segmented by region.
Yes.
And hopefully that's maybe a conversation that can come up in some of the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
If there's a breakout, we're going to do breakout rooms focused on certain regions, and maybe I'm hoping that aspect will come up in that conversation. But that's a really good.
But I think that the figure is quite saying already. I will stop now sharing and we discuss. There are a couple more questions that we would want to share with you, but let's continue now with the rest of the program.
Awesome.
And sorry, so I will stop sharing now and let's move to the next one.
So
All right.
are we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom. I was just about to ask where we are in the run of the show. You'll tell us.
Yes. So very quickly, we're going to shoot over to Jeanna again about some of the history, wins, and best practices coming of the TPC, and then into the expanding regions. One thing that we kind of wanted to cover real quick is just putting faces to names. So you should be able to see my screen. This is the current Technology Policy Committee as it stands. Virginia, Jeanna, the chairs. We have chairs in Europe. Michelle Simpson is the Tech Briefs chair. So if you're interested, I encourage you to take a look at our Tech Briefs. Those are short, easily consumable briefs for policymakers and general public on technology policy issues. And we put it out like a journal with peer review and expert review, as well as high production value. So if you're interested in participating in that, we're always looking for authors and subjects. Sorrel is the US TPC chair. James is past chair of the TPC. And then very quickly, this is the broader TPC committee. I'm not going to read all the names, but just so you're aware, there's SIG representation. So if you are a member of a SIG, these are the folks to reach out to if you have a policy question for the TPC. Unfortunately, just want to note Edson couldn't join, but he's in Brazil. Mohan, Meenakshi, and then I needed to update. We have one more. Apologies, Balaji, but you are not in there right now. But Balaji is also on the Expanding Regions Committee, which we're starting to form. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and over to you, Jeanna.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned tech briefs again, and I put a link in the chat because that's another way that we can influence policymakers. And we can also influence the more general public. These are short explainers that can really explain the nuts and bolts of a technology to folks. And that might be an especially effective way to go in some regions more than others. Okay, so the next thing I would like to do is just set the context a little history, a little context about the technology policy work so far at ACM, what has worked, what we're known for. So I don't know how many of you might have participated in ACM's 75th anniversary celebration in 2022, but the policy work at ACM is not nearly as old as that. The first policy work within ACM was focused on the US, and that started in 1992. And it started especially with Barbara Simons. She was the first chair of that initial TPC group. And she has a real expertise and focus on election security. And that's certainly one important technology policy issue, but it's expanded way beyond that since then. And I would say that the technology policy space around the world is getting more and more crowded, more and more loud everywhere, especially with AI policy. But ACM has a really unique contribution or place in this conversation because we represent the people who are developing the fundamental underlying technologies, whether as researchers or engineers. And we have an opportunity to be not a lobbying organization, but really an honest broker of solid technical information, along with the pros and cons behind those technologies. And there was recently, ACM did a survey of members, and for the first time, one of the biggest things that people were saying they wanted from their professional society in this time is policy work. And all of you who joined today, I'm sure that's a big part of why you're here, is you see the technologies that we all invest our lives in building being used for both good and ill, and would like to have some voice and impact on shifting that more towards the good side. And we have a real opportunity, policymakers, government officials around the world are bombarded by by snake oil salesmen, very biased takes on what should be technology policy that might benefit a particular company or a particular sector or a particular set of stakeholders. And ACM really has an opportunity to be a set of voices that represent a deep technical bench of understanding of how a technology works, and a desire to honestly present the pros and cons, not from a tweaked special interest perspective. So, and I'll just say, I've been a part of the technology policy work at ACM for about 2 decades. And I have really seen that on the things that I care about a lot, if I try to say, Jeanna says this, I write an op-ed or I try to argue something in a paper, it doesn't have nearly the impact as if I work within our professional society together with others to develop consensus statements And we can put out something that says, the ACM Global Technology Policy Council says. It can just have a lot more impact. And someone just asked, have ACM voices been included in U.S. congressional hearings? And yes, actually, that's, some of the stories I wanted to tell. Maybe I'll jump right to that. Some examples of that, of testimony before U.S. Congress, in particular, Barbara Simons talked about elections. Gene Spafford, Ed Felton, LaTanya Sweeney, Ben Schneiderman, Vince Cerf. I think those are all people who have testified before Congress. There's also been examples of folks very active in ACM who have held big leadership roles, like Ed Felton and LaTanya Sweeney, Lori Craner, roles like Chief Technology Officer for the Federal Trade Commission, White House, Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer. I had an opportunity to work on the NIST's AI risk management framework. And again, just kind of from a personal perspective, telling this story, I saw even more impact of being able to help develop something that was like NIST says. So these are all ways that you can, and whenever you engage in technology policy conversations as a researcher, as a scientist or an engineer, you have an opportunity to wear multiple hats. You can speak from the perspective of your own research. You can speak from the perspective of your interest as a citizen. And you can also, when you work together with other people within ACM, you can say, here is something that the ACM technology policy groups have blessed as an ACM product. And in addition to that, I have comments that might go beyond that in my personal capacity. So it's a real opportunity to have an impact on what you see around you in the news, the way technology is influencing society, and wanting that to be the kind of impact you want to see in the world, the kind of impact that you will feel proud of. So I told you a little bit about the history of the U.S. group. I would say, let me tell you a little bit more. I would say that there's been primarily interaction at the federal level, but occasionally at the state level. There's been impact, especially on the legislative branch, congressional staffers, but also on the judicial branch, as I mentioned, like with the FTC and things like that, or the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. Sorrell Friedler, who is the U.S. TPC chair, worked in a huge impact in that capacity. We also, as I said, watch for calls for public comment from all sorts of branches of government. And I think Chris Hankin is going to be speaking a bit more about the Europe TPC, but I think a very similar structure has been followed there. Impact on the EU and also on the UK government. And if we take an example of AI policy in particular, in 2017, we had a statement on algorithmic transparency and accountability that was a U.S., which at that time it was US ACM, but now US TPC product. In 2022, we had a statement on principles for responsible algorithmic systems that was a global TPC, US TPC, and Europe TPC product combined. Fairly recently, there was a big win of 3 of 4 recommendations from Europe TPC being adopted by the UK government on their AI regulation. So that was a big deal. There's many examples of real impact over the years. And we really want to make sure that anyone who's interested in public policy work, any ACM member interested in public policy work anywhere in the world, has the opportunity to get ACM resources behind them in their desire to work in this way. And also that we can offer these kinds of independent, honest broker of technology perspectives to policymakers around the world. So I will pass it back to Tom. to tell us
All
what's
right.
up. I don't know if we want to do any more looking at our polls, or we're already going to panelists. Tan, you tell us what's next.
Yeah, so we're right at time for regional policy landscapes. And we've already covered the expanding regions launch. I don't know, Jeanna, if you want to talk a little bit more about that at all. But very quickly, if you do, 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll go to, or skip it and go straight to the regional policy landscapes.
Yeah, I said all of that already. Yeah, go on to the panelists.
Okay. Great. So first up, we have Meenakshi. And so I'll go ahead and pin her onto remove pin. And all right, she's going to lay the context, and then we're going to go into slides from Balaji. So
That's right.
take
Yeah.
it away.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone, and hearty welcome to the participants of the ACM TPC webinar. This is a very special webinar because it focuses on expanding regions, and I am from one such region. I'm Meenakshi. I work at IIIT Bangalore and also volunteer as a member of the ACM India Council. I'm sure all the participants here, we are aware of our increasing dependencies on technology and the underlying issues that it comes with. The current dominance of technology in their daily lives will definitely leave a mark in the world history. There's no doubt about it. I think we all know that. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to witness the evolving changes. But at the same time, as we all know, it's important for us to understand the manifestation of technology and its use from one geographical region to the other. Right from the first question of our poll, there have been questions that have been focusing on, where would you focus on? And there were enough interests for other geographical regions in terms of the manifestation of technology there. It's mainly because the technology is perceived differently in different geographical regions. Similarly, it's perceived differently by children, by adolescents and adults. There was this conversation about social media missing and social media being considered as a privacy threat. Adults might view it that way, but adolescents clearly don't view it that way. Technology also is perceived differently with gender and geography. And all of these, I believe, can be addressed effectively by policy and governance towards maximizing the benefits of technology, cutting across different segments of the society. As ACM reaffirms its commitment to effectively addressing the various policy aspects of technology, this is one such webinar that witnesses that. Another specific goal of the webinar is to grow in this commitment by actively discussing, collaborating with stakeholders in the various regions where an exclusive expanding regions technology policy committee is not present and could be formed across the globe. So some of the speakers today, including my colleague Balaji, will address technology and policy issues specific to certain regions, to start with the country that we come from, India. And we look forward to your active exchange of ideas, further interactions, not only during the webinar, but also after the webinar. Please do stay in touch and get back in touch if you'd like to contribute to the Expanding Regions TPC. So with this, Tom, let me hand it over to Balaji, and he could talk about the rest of policy issues in India.
All right. Your screen is up. You're ready to go.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Meenakshi. Thanks, Tom. I'm Balaji Parthasarathy, and I'm a colleague of Meenakshi at the International Institute of Information Technology in Bangalore. I come from a social science background, and I'm not a technologist, but I do look at technology policy. I've been looking at it for a few years. The next slide, Tom. So, yeah, thank you. So let me give a quick overview of what this presentation is about. First, like Meenakshi said, the diffusion of computing across the world is sort of actually non-negotiable, or sort of is taken for granted as far as social and economic change is concerned. But what I'd like to say is the world is not flat. In other words, technology diffusion cannot be seen as merely an infrastructural engineering challenge. And access to technology has always been socially and spatially uneven. And there is no evidence that digital technologies are an exception. So in a sense, we will find historical unevenness sort of repeating itself in new ways. So with technology, I'd argue the question is not if it should be produced or used, rather it is about the terms and axes of use, its utility, and the challenges it poses for us in our current era. And I think as a professional body, ACM should be, like to use Jeanna's favorite term, the honest broker, which I like, to publicly share analysis of the value of digital technologies and their limitations and the trade-offs that are involved, leaving it to the public and policymakers to determine what choices are to be made. So in order to do this, so what I'm going to do is I'll draw on sort of 3 examples from India, one of which will actually highlight a term in the word cloud, digital identity. And there are a couple of other issues that I'd also like to highlight. Next, please. Yeah. So let me start by an issue that just made huge waves in the Indian press. Meta came to India and said that they're going to make a $15 billion investment in a huge AI hub in the eastern city of Visakhapatnam in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now that raises a number of questions, but I'll come to that a little later. Now, this is all part of a larger sort of a rhetoric and policy sort of initiative by the government of India called Digital India, which says we're going to power to empower. And Digital India was launched to provide, digital infrastructure for every citizen, governance and services on demand, and digital empowerment of citizens. Now, these things sound fine, but I do think, there are certain, issues and challenges that need to be sort of understood more closely before we completely buy into the rhetoric. Next, please. So I'm going to take, 3 case studies about or things that have been promoted under the Digital India initiative. So one is the rise of gig work, right? So in order to include citizens who are often excluded from the digital revolution, the country is focused on sort of creating income-generating opportunities for low-skilled workers on digital platforms, and especially in a country like India where there's relatively high levels of unemployment and unemployment. And so today, India sort of has more digital platforms than any other country apart from the US. And something like, 4 to 5% of the non-agricultural workforce is actually working on digital platforms. The number is expected to hit about 24, 25 million by the end of this decade. Now, that's all fine, but I think what's somewhat problematic is that this growth in the number of platforms employment is framed as an economic revolution unleashed by a new age digital economy, and quotes, democratization of the labor market, where anybody with an internet-enabled smartphone and a vehicle can earn a living. And platforms tend to project themselves as making labor markets more efficient by creating jobs that pay fair wages. However, research that I've been doing and leading at IIIT over the last 6-7 years shows that platforms don't pay a minimum wage, and workers who do earn a minimum wage often work hours that go well beyond the standard 48-hour week. Workers face very opaque work conditions because they're classified as partners, which legally limits access to labor protection, social security, and collective bargaining rights. And in this connection, I'd like to add that a couple of years ago, me and my team were invited before the Parliamentary Standing Committee in India to testify about gig work. Next, please, Tom. Yeah. The second thing is about digital public infrastructure and Aadhaar. Aadhaar is the digital identity in India. And India is seen as a pioneer in conceptualizing and architecting digital public infrastructure, which the World Bank has said is the foundational digital building blocks for public benefit and key infrastructure for the 21st century. Now, critical to India's DPI architecture is India's stack, a set of open APIs and digital goods that essentially unlock the economic primitives of identity, data, and payments at population scale. Now, India Stack developed Aadhaar, which is a unique number serving as a foundational ID that allows service providers to improve accountability and transparency in governance by enabling service providers to biometrically authenticate individuals. And the economics Nobel laureate Paul Romer recently described Aadhaar as the most sophisticated ID program in the world. And since it was first issued in 2010, Aadhaar is the world's largest ID system. Roughly about 1.5 billion IDs have now been issued. Next, please. Yeah, but again, research has shown the expanding scale and coverage by DPIs does not translate into greater inclusion. In a country like India, where we still grapple with significant digital divide, barely, less than 60% of the population actually has access to the internet and uses it. And second, access to DPRs does not guarantee effective use. In the public distribution system, for instance, which provides food grains as a safety net for the less affluent, poor internet connectivity and smudged foot fingerprints means that biometric authentication is a challenge, often resulting in citizens being denied their basic entitlement to food grains. And faced with such difficulties, citizens are often forced to rely on new intermediaries to navigate the digital world. Next, please. Tom, next. Yeah. And finally, the third case, to come back to the data centers. And so here's some of the headlines that we are sort of dealing with. To be fair, we don't quite know the effects of data centers. A lot of it is sort of not understood, but I do think we have to sort of bring this into the conversation. Here's an article in IEEE Spectrum where a Caltech professor says, we do need to talk about AI's impact on public health. Now, that's on the social side. On the economic side, a recent Wall Street Journal article quoting a number of people said the AI data center boom is a job creation bust, because job creation is one of the promises on which it is brought into different parts of the world. And in India itself, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, people are starting to ask a lot of questions about the relevance of the $15 billion investment. Next, please. So some concluding thoughts with these three quick case studies from India. See, the potential that computing technologies have to bring to social change in less affluent parts of the world is hard to argue against. But it is also critical to acknowledge that deploying these technologies have their costs. Now, assessing these costs and pointing to their implications is very, very crucial to avoid extreme all or nothing positions on technology, right? And it is in providing nuance to these debates, whether among policymakers or in society at large, between different interests and about how and when to use technology, that an organization like ACM can play a very valuable role. It can play an especially valuable role in emerging regions where technology is often promoted as a panacea to various social ills, right? And in India and other countries, professional organizations may not have the last word. However, they're institutions that can guide an informed debate in the public domain. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Now over to Mohan for his remarks.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm going to give a very different perspective, very personal kind of a journey in joining this council. So I have joined this council when I was invited by Virginia and Jeanna, because I find its activities very meaningful and impactful, and I want to elaborate on that. So over the last 10 years, I have interacted with the local regulator. So I'm Mohan Kankanhalli. I'm at the National University of Singapore. In Singapore, our local regulator is IMDA, the Infocom Media Development Authority. And they've been funding research, and they've been actually quite proactively engaging with the academics. And I've been one of the persons who have been, constantly engaging with our regulator. And I kind of have conversations with them on privacy technologies, on deepfake issues, as well as AI safety and security challenges. I have also worked with the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on AI during 2023-2024, which incidentally was co-chaired by Virginia. I think we made some very interesting contribution. We came up with a white paper on value alignment in AI systems, as well as red lines for AI systems. So a lot of these issues on privacy, on deepfakes, on misinformation, on AI safety, red teaming, all these issues have really technological underpinnings. However, there are also many local nuances as well. For example, most recently, I'm involved with the AI safety issues here in Singapore and in Asia in general. Any of the deployable models, the AI, frontier models, the foundation models, if they have to be deployed in this region, either Singapore or Asia Pacific, they have to be multilingual, multicultural, and multi-religious. So all these, local requirements, they pose very interesting regulatory challenges as well as complex research challenges. So what I found is this work is not only meaningful and impactful, it actually informs my research as a professor. And to give a very concrete example, I first got involved with our regulator a few years ago on privacy technologies. In fact, they funded a research center at the National University of Singapore on privacy technologies. And this was around the time the GDPR was enacted in Europe. And GDPR has this right to be forgotten. And we started having conversations with our regulator. And I think the right to be forgotten is nice to have it from the regulatory perspective, but there is also it has to be actually implemented by companies or platforms. So we started, looking with the emergence of AI. My group was actually one of the first groups in the world which started to look into machine learning. And that area has actually exploded over the last 2-3 years. Because if you're going to have AI models which are trained on a lot of public data, sometimes not sourced in a very ethical manner, there are a lot of privacy concerns. If these models have private sensitive data, and how do you remove such data from these models? So unlearning has become a big issue. So I, just to kind of give a concluding remark, I therefore think getting involved in ACM Technology Council, the Policy Council, can be very rewarding, either at the regional level or at the global level. It is very intellectually rewarding, as well as it is a means of giving back to the local and the regional community. And I look forward to having more conversations in the breakout session. Thank you.
Next up is Chris. So give me a second to load up your slides. Let's see.
While you're loading those, I'm sure I should convey Michelle's apologies for not being able to be here to talk to you this afternoon. So I'm standing in his stead. So maybe if we could move straight on to the next slide. The next slide introduces me, so it's better that we start there. So I'm a professor of computing at Imperial College in London, and I've been a member of the ACM since 1994. My own research areas are program analysis and more recently, really for the last 20 years, cybersecurity. And I've been chair of the ACM Europe Council, which is the regional council for Europe, obviously for ACM from 2017 to 2019. Just at the moment, I'm still past chair of that because of various things that have happened in the council since 2019. And I was chair of the Europe TPC from 2020 to 2024. So I'm the immediate past chair of the Europe TPC. The Europe TPC, Jeanna inadvertently mentioned US ACM. I should probably mention EU ACM, which was the precursor to Europe TPC, which was founded in about 2012, and I became involved in it in about 2016. So I've not had as long a term involvement in Europe TPC as Jeanna has in US ACM, but I have been around for quite a long time. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So just something about the committee. Michel, as I say, sends his apologies for this afternoon. He had another appointment which unfortunately he couldn't decline. So he's the current chair, I'm the immediate past chair. The way we operate is through various working groups or subcommittees, and currently we have 5 of those. So we focus on cybersecurity, we focus on the impact of IT on climate change. So we have a climate change committee, we have an AI committee, we have one that looks at data and data governance, and we have one that looks at autonomous systems, and the names of the people leading those various subcommittees are in brackets after the names of the subcommittees. And then we have a number of members at large and ex officio members, which is a kind of standard committee structure. If we look at Europe TPC in a slightly broader way, we have about 160 members, but I'll come back to that a little bit in my sort of final slide. So if we could move on, please, to the next slide. So I guess it's important to understand that in Europe, we have various potential targets for our policy outputs. And the primary ones are shown on the kind of diagonal through this slide. So the European Commission, the European Parliament, which sort of basically drafts laws and so on the basis of advice from the European Commission, and the Council of the European Union, which brings together the individual member states to actually enact those regulations and laws. And the European Commission operates very largely by issuing consultations around the various regulations and directives that it's planning to develop. And that's a primary target for the work of Europe TPC, in that we have an opportunity as ACM's Europe TPC to respond to those consultations. And as Jeanna mentioned, the European Commission has been very focused on things like the AI Act, cybersecurity, various aspects of cybersecurity and resilience, and also data and data governance. We've had the opportunity to respond to those various consultations, and indeed many of our responses can be traced through to the eventual regulations and so on that are published then by the European Union. Now, the other things on this slide are the individual member states who also enact their own regulations, often derived from the European regulations, but implementation is not necessarily uniform across all of the EU. So member states have some work to do there. And then one has to remember that in addition to the 27 members of the European Union, there are actually in total 44 countries in Europe, and the Europe TPC aims to address demands for information and so on from all of those countries. So there are the non-member states as well, which are potential targets for our policy outputs. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So then here are just a few of our recent policy products. The majority of them there were targeted at the EU. We, for example, made some inputs on recommendations on climate disclosure in the AI Act. We made some recommendations on greener data centers, and recommendations and comments on high-value data sets. We've also commented on the Cyber Resilience Act within Europe. But we've also produced some policy briefs. We have been active contributors to the Tech Brief portfolio that Jeanna and Virginia mentioned in their opening remarks. And most recently, our most recent policy brief has been one looking at systemic risks associated with agentic AI. So all of these can be found on the ACM Europe TPC webpage, which is hosted on the ACM website. So you can look at any of these in more detail to see the kind of thing that we're producing. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. Some of our work is also done in collaboration. Virginia and Jeanna have both mentioned the UN and the ITU. Within Europe, there's something called the European Internet Forum, which we have associate membership of. which gives us access to meetings which they host typically in Brussels. And all of their meetings are chaired by members of the European Parliament. And there's fairly good engagement from the European Parliament in those meetings. So we're able to both propose topics for those meetings and also participate in them. And then there's also something called the European Green Digital Coalition, which is actually a coalition of businesses in Europe, but ACM is a supporting partner, which gives us an opportunity to engage with some of the businesses on green issues. And this slide probably should have also mentioned something called the Scientific Advice Mechanism, which is a mechanism which supports the chief scientific advisors to the European Union and runs a series of projects looking at various aspects, including many which involve deployment of IT systems, and when appropriate, ACM provides input to the scientific advice mechanism, which will then formulate, help the European Commission to formulate its policies. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So we have some challenges. One of the key challenges we have, and I was pleased to hear Jeanna mention the UK AI Act, which seems to have taken on a number of our recommendations that were developed first in the European context. But there is a general issue, and I think US TPC probably faces the same issue of how really to measure the impact that Europe TPC or US TPC are actually really having on policy making. We'd like to have more policy events, maybe of this kind, but also face-to-face meetings. So we have recently done something at Dagstuhl, which is a European Centre for technical meetings, and we had a meeting there focused on some of the climate change issues. I think the third point here is about we've produced lots of written output. I've just in a previous slide shown you some of the recent policy products which appear on the ACM web pages. But how do we get the commissioners and the members of the European Parliament, and indeed members of non-EU states, to actually look at those products and actually use them? And then finally, we have a membership of 150. Most of our products are produced by rather small teams of 3 or 4 people, and we're really keen to find ways of actually getting many more of our members active in producing these kinds of policy outputs. So I think that's the end, Tom. I think my last slide is about getting in touch and getting in touch through you. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Over to Jeanna to introduce the breakout sessions, and then we'll have kind of a prompt right before we go over. But this is the section where we're going to try to have facilitated conversations based off of regions. So Jeanna, do you want to describe that?
Absolutely. Before we head into breakout sessions, I put some emails in the chat. Looks like somehow 2 came out with links and 1 didn't. Not sure why, but those are emails for Virginia and Tom and I. And we would, in addition to hearing your feedback in the Mentimeter and in the breakout sessions, we would welcome the opportunity to have more follow-up conversations. Please be patient with us. If there's 73 attending, we're thrilled you're here. It might take us a little while to work through all those conversations, but that's exactly why we're having this webinar. We want to hear from everyone. We want to try to connect people to the right places and form the right places within expanding regions so that everyone who has great ideas in this technology policy space can be plugged in the right way, and ACM can support you in having the impact that you want to have. Before we go into breakouts, Virginia, did we have a few more Mentimeter questions we wanted to get from everyone? I can't remember now where we are.
There is one more which
one
we
more,
can
okay.
look at, but yes, we can put that one. So if you go back to the Mentimeter, I'm presenting. Let me share my screen.
And maybe you might need to put I'll look back in the chat. Oh, let me also say that I've been trying to watch the chat for things and have responded to a few people there. If somehow I missed something you said in the chat, you didn't get don't hesitate to reach out in email afterwards. We're doing the best we can in real time to manage all the different.
Back to the last question that we had for you, it's maybe also starting for the discussions in the breakout rooms in terms of what do you see, what are the biggest barriers for tech policy at international or regional or national level, because these are kind of issues that can be maybe discussed in the breakout rooms.
And I think the comment that Carlos had made earlier about it would be really great to see this broken down by regions is a really good one.
Yes, we didn't
Still,
do that,
and
but
again, we can
maybe reach out
Yeah.
with a
Yes.
post-meeting questionnaire asking those issues.
That's a great idea, Virginia. Okay. So while we're waiting for this to kind of settle a little, let me describe how I think we're going to do the breakout sessions. We are going to, so I believe Balaji and Meenakshi are going to lead a breakout session specifically about the India region. And I think Chris is going to do one focused on Europe. I think Tom Romanoff is going to do one on the US. Virginia is going to do one or I'm going to do one on Latin America. It was going to be Edson. And I apologize but I'm going to do my best there. And Virginia's going to do one for the rest of the world. And if any of the sessions feel smaller than you want them to be, feel free to decide.
Mohan is also doing one on Asia.
But maybe there were only 5 people from Asia excluding India. So should we merge with Virginia's group?
Maybe it's a good idea, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there was 4 in Latin America, and I was going to start in that subgroup and just talk with people before merging in with Virginia, but it could just merge in with the rest of the world now. I don't think there's any one right answer here. Basically, we're going to put up some breakout rooms, and you can choose which you want to go to, and whoever's leading each breakout room, if it's not feeling like there's really critical mass there, don't hesitate to leave and go to the rest of the world where Virginia will be leading that. Does that sound like a good plan to everyone? Okay, so everyone kind of take a look at the Mente results here, and if anyone had any comments about them, we could make them, but we can also just do that in the breakout sessions.
Yeah. Let's move on. Also, given the time.
I don't think we're all necessarily going to come back together here. I think we'll basically end from the breakout sessions. But once again, please reach out to us. Send us an email with the things you're interested in participating in. And we'd very much like to hook everyone up in the right way. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go. I see some comments about the Latin America group. I am going to go there to start. So we'll start there and we'll talk for a while. And if we want to join Virginia and the rest of the world after that, we will.
Good. Yes.
Okay.
And now I leave it to, I stop sharing, I think, this as co-list. And I leave it to Tom or Jan to explain how to go to the breakout rooms.
And thank you everyone so much for joining. And thank you to all the panelists and speakers who put together such thoughtful remarks.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And indeed, we will stop the event from the breakout rooms. So thank you again, everybody.